the treasurer of our association now. This event started from this point. So as a result, our dream came true now. I know the year 2020 will not be remembered very well, but I also know that humanity overcame every single phenomenon and event like this to date. As it seems to me that it's a history of disasters ranging from the Ice Age to the Black Death during the medieval times, from the World Wars to the Spanish flu, etc. I don't want to steal the role from the conference. Therefore, I want to move on the organizational issues. But let me just one thing in this issue. COVID-19 virus and its impact on culture and art is a fact. And based on this experience, it is possible to make a balance sheet from the field of culture and art, as well as possible ways out and ways to establish tomorrow's new art. So we have to talk on it, and this conference was born from such a desire. Before I continue, let me introduce AICA to the attendees a little bit. So toward the end of the 1940s, when many schools and diverse movements in arts were flourishing, art critics, art historians, and art educators, as well as curators from museums of modern art, gathered at two congresses at UNESCO headquarters in 1948 and 1949. So their aim was to compare their point of views concerning the vocation of art criticism, to analyze their responsibility in regard to artistic and public, and to outline the particular nature of their contributions in relation to developments in the fields of art history. So convening from around the world, they included among them the most prestigious names of the times, such as Herbert Reed, or Albert Tucker, or Leonello Venturi, etc. So following those two international congresses at UNESCO, the International Association of Art Critics was founded in 1950 and was admitted in 1951 to the rank of NGO. So AICA comprises various experts anxious to develop international cooperation in the fields of artistic creation, dissemination, and cultural development. And AICA brings together thousands of art professionals from different countries all over the world now, and organized into many national sections and an open section also we have. And placed at the crossroad of cultures, AICA, whose principal objective is to serve contemporary creativity, is now in a better position than even to see its role and its activities increase throughout the world, thanks to breadth of its representation and the contacts it maintains. So we can say that AICA's main objectives are to promote art criticism as a discipline and to contribute to its methodology, to protect the ethical and professional interests of its members and to cooperate in defending their rights, to maintain an active international network for its members with the aid of available technologies and encouragement to face-to-face encounters, to contribute to mutual understanding of visual arts and aesthetics in all cultures. So to defend impartially freedom of expression and thought and oppose arbitrary censorship. I think at this point, let me stop and show my gratitude to the supporters of this event. First of all, I must convey our president's message to you, with your permission. Elizabeth Rebollo Gonçalves. So her message: I'm very pleased to greet you on behalf of AICA International. Conferences, seminars, and congresses are very important in AICA's life to project up-to-date questions in the field of art and society. Since 1948, there have been milestones for our association worldwide and for the art establishment at large. So I would like to thank Fırat Arapoğlu and AICA Turkey for the organization of this conference, and the SAHA Association for the support making this event possible. I welcome and greet all the participants who are contributing to this online conference. I'm sure Art World, Refleksler, and Alternatif New World will arise important discussions for understanding the present times. Have a wonderful meeting. My best regards. Thanks a lot, Lisbeth. I can give you good words on behalf of our boards, and let me congratulate you again for your re-election of our association as president now. And now also I want to convey the message by Liam Kelly, who is Emeritus Professor of Irish Visual Culture at Uluslararası University, and also Liam is the chair of AICA International Congress Committee. Joseph Beuys' catchphrase, Kunst equals capital, could not be more opposite than at this time during a global pandemic. The phrase carries the binary charge of commerce and well-being. Not only is the arts industry threatened by lack of revenue and closures, but arts practitioners are deprived of funding and opportunities to present their work, while national governments are striving to balance the protection of lives while sustaining livelihoods. The arts in many respects are about shared experience, whether it's the importance of one-to-one teaching and learning in arts education, or the group dynamic engendered in a theater, music hall, or cinema. But despite the need for self-isolation, artists have found creative ways to communicate, whether it is by way of the internet or socially minded public art interventions. We may be in a crisis and under communal stress, but the art sector is not bankrupt of ideas and enterprise. In this regard, AICA International applauds the initiative taken by AICA Turkey in organizing an online conference, providing an interactive forum for a variety of interest groups to address the opportunities and challenges of this persistent and debilitating cultural, social, and political dilemma. Thank you very much, Liam Kelly. If you can give me some more time, I would like to especially thanks for the support in making this event. First of all, I would like to thank to AICA International. They support both this conference and our international congress that we want to realize next year. We hope that we can hold our General Assembly titled Intellectual Aftermath, the theme by one of our board members, art critic Sinan Eren Erk. So we hope that we can realize face-to-face in Istanbul, and we can bring again together researchers and speakers from all over the world for that conference. In the context of AICA International Office, I would like to thank to Ms. Mathilde Romain and Sonia Recasens and Elisa Ruska and Mark Partouche. They supported the global spreading of this conference. And I also thank the board members of AICA Turkey as well, Çiğdem Zeytin, Evrim Altu, Güler Bek Arat, and Sinan Eren Erk. So we invited scientists and researchers engaged in research in art criticism and art history to join us online at this AICA Online International Conference. So our main aim is to bring together online researches realized by local and international scholars. So all speakers, according to their abstracts now, will share their observation and research about art in the time of pandemic, epidemics in art and art history, art criticism in the time of pandemic, and impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on art and culture, etc. I would like to thank to our invited speakers. Julian Stalabras visited us previously, supported us again. Dear Stalabras, thank you very much, and we are happy with your presence. Dear Pascal Gillen and Marlies de Munk accepted our offer via dear Dr. Esra Yıldız, who is a member of us also. I'd like to thank them all to realize this sharing. And at the end, dear Irina Chmireva visited us at the beginning of 2019. I would like to thank her. SAHA Association supports us to realize this event as a non-governmental organization established in 2011 by a group of art enthusiasts united around the shared goal of supporting contemporary arts from Turkey. And I'd like to thank to Borusan as a business group growing in Turkey, and also create permanent social responsibility projects like this, and they supported us also. You can reach the detailed program of the conference. It's abstract book and the program book. I think it's about the upload on the website of the conference and also website of our association. So you can find them in aicaturkey.org or aicaon2020.com. And ultimately, let me just say some words on 2021 AICA Congress in Istanbul. By bringing art again in its focus, the 53rd International AICA Congress will aim to examine the intellectual aftermath, the most apparent reality of our age, and to explore the possible new horizons to the future. So the subtopics of the Congress will be such as what are the reflections of the social psychology affected by collective traumas on art practice and theory as a form of reconstitution, and how can non-global economic models be structured on the axis of the art market and institutions, and how can we structure non-global economic models on the axis of the art market and institutions, and how can the global criteria of art theory be overcome, censorship, political correctness, Eurocentrism, etc., and how do the political indicators reflect on art, and what is the effect of art on politics. So it's very strange that at that time when we offered the AICA 2021 Congress to AICA International, the last subtopics of our article was art in the times of crisis. So we would like to follow also the process of 2021 AICA Congress that we want to realize in Istanbul as well. Thank you very much for all your support. Thank you. I think that at this point, our honorary president of AICA Turkey, Ms. Beren Madra, can start her speech.
Thank you, Fırat. Dear AICA International President Lisbeth Gonçalves, dear Global AICA International members, dear AICA Turkey President and board members, dear artists and art critics and all the people who are participating in this online conference. I greet all of you with affection and wish you a safe and pleasant conference. I would especially thank to our President Fırat Arapoğlu and the board members for their extraordinary willpower, energy, and devotion. They succeeded to organize this conference in the current pandemic conditions. Thank you. I am an art critic and curator since 1980s and had the opportunity to found again AICA Turkey in 2003. The pandemic has also changed my life. Due to the pandemic, since June, I am living in Ayvalık, a historical coastal town on North Aegeis, across Lesbos Island. The town has various cultural and artistic establishments, and over 40 artists of different disciplines are living here. Since 1997, an institute on Ayvalık's Cunda Island, the intensive Ottoman and Turkish summer school, hosts students to learn Ottoman Turkish every year in August. Since 2007, a new artist residency, Barbara House, is hosting contemporary artists, and since July 2020, Gate 27 has founded its Ayvalık branch of artist residency. There is a library of art history and culture, municipal art gallery, a theater, and an open-air concert arena, as well as Ayvalık Music Academy and a film festival. This town is a special neighbor to Lesbos Island. The people of both territories are in close contact and communication in economic and cultural issues, without ever plugging into adverse political relations between Turkey and Greece. Before the pandemic, I was planning an art and culture summer conference in Lesbos with colleagues and foundations there, which is postponed indefinitely until the end of the pandemic. I am happy that we are able to make this very timely conference now. This zeitgeistlich conference we are holding now will create a very significant accumulation of statements, concepts, and opinions of an estimable group of art and culture experts who dedicated their careers, knowledge, and activities to global art and culture. This conference is out of the ordinary, not because it is online, but above all, because it is happening in a moment of global pandemic. I will tell it with other words, on the threshold of a transformation towards an uncertain future. Let us hope that this transformation will lead the humanity to create a peaceful and more habitable life with absolute human rights, freedom of expression, ecological consciousness, solidarity, and creative communications and collaborations. Moreover, I'm hoping that through this potential positive transformation, art and culture production can claim a more strong global position in proposing and providing sustainable solutions to the current difficult conditions created by political polarizations and economic depression. The communication and electronic revolution have already changed the global life. For the moment, the great question is still the same, at least in our war and terror traumatized region. These questions are: how are we going to make our politicians and bureaucrats lacking in sense of hearing, seeing, and perceiving that contemporary art and culture is the most effective communication and collaboration tool of the world? Depending only on private sector financial support and corporate institutional activities is not a preferred system. The artists and art experts have to be independent, have to collaborate with private sector, even if their political and social ideologies are not in tune. The financial supports should be unbiased. For within the age of electronic information, how to communicate through all of this information, how to understand each other, and how to mediate was the most vital issue. Within the pandemic conditions, we are experiencing how it is functioning perfectly. In this regard, we are gladly dependent on the knowledge and skills of the young generations. In the current context, art and culture and related technologies and visual material becomes the lighthouse for the people confined in their homes and suffering under depressive economic conditions and devastated politics. If we want to preserve whatever glorious we have now, and if we want to control our destiny within the global dystopic era and the mega maze of electronic technology, we have to count on our projects, commitments, and trust the artists, curators, and art critics. I wish you all a profitable, effective, and pleasant online conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beral Madra. So I think in 8 minutes we can start with the speech by dear Julian Stalabras.
Hi there.
Hi.
How's things?
Thank you. How are you? I hope that.
I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, Julian, I think we can start with you again, and let me introduce you to our attendees shortly, and we can continue. Sorry. Dear Professor Julian Stalabras, a lecturer, writer, photographer, and curator, with a particular interest in the relation between art and political issues. And his research and teaching is in areas of modern and contemporary art, including the globalization of art and biennial scene, the history of photography and new media art. So recently, he's been working on documentary photography, film and video, especially in the depiction of war. He's also been researching populism in contemporary art and politics. Stalabras wrote many books, Gargantua, High Art Light, and also he's well known in our contemporary art scene in Turkey. His book translated into Turkish Art Incorporated, the contemporary art, a very short introduction. And also let me congratulate you for your recent book, Killing for Show, Photography, War and the Media in Vietnam and Iraq. It's very newly published, as far as I know, Julian.
That's right.
That's great. That's great. So on behalf of AICA Turkey, first of all, I want to thank you to accept our offer to give a speech in the context of this conference. So if it's okay for you, you can start for your speech.
All right, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really good to be here. And yes, indeed, that new book on war is coming out very well. It's out as an ebook. It will be in print very shortly. And also, you may be interested to know that the contemporary art book, which was translated into Turkish, I've been updating it, so that also is nearly available as a very substantial update to the one that I wrote all those years ago. Okay, so I will share my screen. You want me to record as well, is that right? Just as a backup? I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this lecture is about the thorny issue of whether in current circumstances and in neoliberal societies, the people can be grasped conceptually and visually. And it may not seem to bear much on the current crisis and the pandemic. But I think that it does, and I'll explain how it does towards the end. One of the questions is whether a deep crisis in and of itself can help the people cohere, either in the mind or visually. This is a recent piece of street art by Frank Riot about PPE, protective wear and masks and so on, and the NHS. But I want to begin with a more general issue. I've been photographing graffiti and street art for a long time, since the 1980s, an embarrassingly long time, really. And impressionistically, a striking change is the emergence from an apparent chaos of tagging and overwriting, which most people experienced as visual noise, of plain figures and especially faces. As if slowly an analog TV signal was coming into tune, and from the churn of random electrons, a face springs into form, sharpness, and life. And these figures and faces often seem to be of ordinary people. Well, while there's something to this impression, things are not so simple. It conceals a complex and contradictory set of social forces, artistic practices, and aesthetic norms. And the new didn't simply replace the old, but instead, in a dialectical synthesis of the two, the old survives and is overlaid with the new, in an often contentious and hostile relationship in which both are transformed. But first, think briefly of the extraordinary transformation of street art over the last 15 years or so, from being seen mostly as a problem of crime to being mostly seen as an art, from anonymity to occasional but marked celebrity for people like JR, Blue, Banksy, Shepard Fairey, or Cause here, with his painted takes on The Simpsons, from gifts, often unwanted gifts in graffiti, to very expensive products, of which this is one, which dominate the heights of the auction market, and from the performance of temporary work, which would be very transient, to something closer to a fixed image with stickers, posters, and stencils, which are less variable with relationship to their locale, and especially through online sharing and archiving. And from a sign of urban blight to that of youthful regeneration, often with the collaboration of property owners. So one register of this change is to think about the early writings about graffiti and street art, which had a samizdat and dissident air. One of the first of them, Roger Perry's The Writing on the Wall, which really predates even the spray can and the marker pen, was introduced by George Melly, an anarchist musician. And I don't think that's any accidental choice. Melly wrote that in true graffiti, there's an element of anarchic revolt, of opposition to the neat and tidy world of the bureaucrat, policeman, town planner, and lavatory attendant. But now various street arts books are bestsellers. The propaganda arm of the art world produces its usual products devoted to the new stars, and academia has gradually established a literature on the subject. And that success is truly strange because the ethos of each world was, and in some cases remains, deeply antithetical. The art world once despised street art for its simplicity, slavish repetition, popular sources, lack of distinction, and so value, and its association with crime and vandalism. At its worst, seen as gangland territorial marking, it was no better than a dog urinating on a lamppost. And this hostility was amply returned. I'm showing you here one of Jessica Craig Martin's series of photographs about the super rich at play. For graffiti writers, the art world was an elitist shelter for the weak and the talentless, who were protected from critique by a few powerful and snobbish gatekeepers, including critics, who marinated their art with pretentious nonsense. Art's absurd prices, its cocooning in exclusive galleries and museums, made it simply the plaything of the super rich. The gift of street art was set against the exclusive commodity of fine art, popular and thus virtuous simplicity against a false sophistication, a continual openness to reception against curators and gallery guards, the open street against the white cube. Now, these changes were both technological and social. As the graffiti scene grew, spray paint manufacturers catered to it, making new paints and nozzles that allowed better adherence, saturation, blending, and precision. So even good photographs of renowned street graffiti pieces of the 1980s and 90s, and this is a photograph of the well-known artist C, photographed in 1994. These works show work that, despite the undoubted dedication and skill of their makers, can look dull and blurry when compared with the clarity and vibrancy of the new. Connected with this change, especially now when so much street art is experienced in reproduction, was the rise of digital cameras, which dramatically lowered the expertise needed to adequately document work. I mean, reading the accounts and interviews that trace the development of UK graffiti writers as they grew up in the 1980s and 1990s, it's striking how often a single book is mentioned, this one, Martha Cooper and Henry Chalfont's Subway Art. So photography and information used to be rare and pored over, and where once graffiti was short-lived and documented by a few highly dedicated photographers like these two, who would spend hours waiting for decorated trains to pass, knowing that the work that they recorded would be destroyed by cleaning crews that very night. Now, with the ubiquity of digital cameras and online publishing, vulnerable street works gain long lives and their artists considerable reputations. So in both these developments, in of paints and cameras, a familiar de-skilling lowers the barriers to participation. And indeed, street artists themselves generally encourage everyone to pile in. This is a little wall-bound manual for making stencil work. Now, the old graffiti writing was and remains ambiguously radical. It asks the question, who gets to decorate and paint where? It's a crucial issue over the right to the city in Henri Lefebvre's terms, but who gets to control the urban environment? And it's pitched against commercial and state interests, as here, over who gets to paint the street and decorate it, including the church, as well as commerce and the government. And as Banksy put it, any advert in a public space that gives you no choice whether you see it or not is yours. And so subvertising is a sort of sub-branch of street art generally. And it's also an illegal act with a high price paid in some cases, even death for the train painters. This is the well-known 1980s graffiti writer Blade. His work you see on a train on the left, and that's him in action on the right, photographed by Martha Cooper. But it's also a mutation of capitalist publicity culture in which the branding, it's a sort of self-branding exercise with the invention of a logo, ironically protected very often by copyright, as here you see. A variable logo, though, formed not once and for all in a design studio, but rather through practice, like the forms of Japanese calligraphy. There's intense hierarchy and competition for ubiquity and prominence, just as with adverts, over especially the size, the prominence, the difficulty of getting to a particular place. To do graffiti where you're most likely to get arrested or killed. This example on the Golden Gate Bridge is an extreme example. It's an advertising for the invisible and those without a product to sell other than the advert itself. Now, this graffiti was usually experienced as chaos to all but insiders or sometimes to insurgent communities. For instance, Black New York neighborhoods with regard to the decorated trains. And as Raphael Schachter has written, it acts as an agent in Alfred Gell's sense in his book Art and Agency, on behalf of rebellious youth, designed to annoy adults and often experienced as a form of pollution. It's tacky in both senses, Schachter says, in being both in bad taste and of a threatening adherence to the body. And in a brilliant set of photographs taken in the New York subway in the 1980s, Bruce Davidson delineated the chaos of such writing as seen from the outside the world of its makers, and the dread that it induced in middle-class people obliged to live with it daily. Well, street art, on the other hand, is quite a different creature, being comparatively accessible, readable, and simple, and often made on a spectacular scale. Remember, with landlords' collaboration very often. This is Heracott working in 2012. It's a creature of the net and social media, which keeps it in circulation even when its physical remnants have gone. And it often has readable figures, human, cartoon, animal, sometimes a recognizable character or brand. And it's an art of faces above all, like this portrait by the well-known artist Jimmy C. And even when based on photographic portraits, they're usually anonymous and emblematic. They show young people, stylish, but not overtly wealthy, more often female than male, and often Black or mixed race. This is a recent piece done by Mr. Sens in the East End of London. These figures tend not to be doing anything, but are simply present. Sometimes they lift their heads as if proudly to greet a coming dawn in a soft echo of socialist realism. But more often they seem quietly introspective or even melancholy. The transience of the painted work is matched with that of youth, pointing to existential and social precariousness. A recent East End mural by Ant Carver shows, which is painstakingly brush painted, it's unusual in that way, has skulls, flowers, and candles in their conventional memento mori role, while dice indicate fortune and fate. The beauty of the young woman and her meditative address to the viewer is found across many similar works. So many street art portraits are memorials, by the way, as is this, though not of the person depicted, which partly points to the rather high mortality rate of graffiti and street artists. The celebrated street artist J.R. represents one pole of this tendency. His signature style hands back via photographic reflection particular individuals to their locales, usually on a monumental scale. He began by depicting poor and underrepresented groups, including the inhabitants of the French banlieue, as here, or favelas in Rio and Kibera. And then he moved on to showing gurning Palestinians pasted up onto the separation wall, along with similarly treated Israelis. The idea was to play up the similarities of people on both sides of the divide. But his ambit has continually expanded with the project Inside Out to include many diverse groupings, or simply whoever was in the vicinity and chose to be photographed when he arrived with his mobile studio. So he did a project at Somerset House, for instance, where my college, the Courtauld, is, and photographed many of the students, who tend to be a fairly privileged bunch. While street art taken as a whole in its effect on the environment tends towards a celebration of ordinary individuals, in JR the demands of art stardom condense the contradictions at work in the whole. His success and signature style stand in an antithetical relationship to the individuals and collectives that he celebrates, while his highly accessible depictions appeal equally to his subjects and their acquaintances, but also to the new class of super rich collectors whose simple tastes are much guided by branding, fashion, and fame. So against these idealist depictions, there's much work that shows figures which embody pain, drudgery, misery, fatigue, intoxication, and especially rage. When artists represent themselves, it's often to play up the bohemian character of their lives. And there's a parallel here, I think, with the bohemians of the 1840s and 1850s Paris that T.J. Clark describes. An assimilated, wretchedly poor, anti-bourgeois, living in uncompromising romantic style, close to the mob of the unemployed and criminals, which also made up part of the rebels of 1848. Street art, as we shall see, is often associated with radical politics, but what it gives it the hard stamp of bohemia is in the sense that Clark outlines its obdurate romanticism and its commitment to a manic and self-destructive individualism, a cult of sensation fueled in the 1840s by wine and hash and by similar substances now. Furthermore, street art makes two central, even definitional, populist moves. The relevance is this pigeons as verbin. It proclaims that it's the authentic voice of the people, especially as opposed to the elitist art world, and what is more, the voice of the underdog. So do we take street art at its word? Is there a collective as well as an individual representation of the people here, at least implicitly? Can we see an image of the people in street art? Let's look at this art as a way to get at that deeply problematic question. What do the people have in common? There are qualities of the look, subject matter, and practice of street art, which feeds into an idealist populism. There's first the idea that of gift giving outside of a commercial culture, and self-consciously so on principle. As one graffiti writer, Joke32, puts it on the attraction of stealing paints. We know we have not given anything to the system, and so we feel satisfied. There's the effective image of the people looking back at itself. There's a non-instrumental purpose of this work, the freedom of those with nothing to sell, as Adorno puts it. and of fluid and plural identities seen in an overarching celebration of everything except power and wealth. And in this, it perhaps fits some leftist utopian imaginings of a world beyond work, in which people are defined by their own projects, their creativity, and their connection with others, and not by the demands of what David Graeber has memorably categorized as bullshit jobs. But maybe that's too rosy a picture. Perhaps street art does all this too comfortably in conformity with existing conditions. Steve Lazaridis, who was once Banksy's dealer, has spoken about the death of street art in its very stylistic diversity. It's no longer a subculture, he says. It serves landlords. It's too much involved with self-advertising, and its artists are generally, immune to arrest, unlike the graffiti writers. So in Sever's rather caustic image here, the coffin of street art is borne by the global street art stars, Barry McGee, Oscar Meros, and Shepard Fairey on the left, Banksy, Futura and Cause, who we've seen before, on the right. Maybe Banksy is the most symptomatic of these figures. His art world career is purely a result of the fever of the speculative boom that preceded the 2008 crash. His work was at first made in contention with the art world, and again, as a parallel here with political populism, as an anti-establishment division between the people cast as underdogs and its other. And above all, because it was not approbation within the art world that drove his market success, but the weight of media hype and popularity. And Banksy's art is extremely populist. It's very simple, cliched, and instantaneously grasped. It relies on familiar advertising techniques. His signature style is little troubled by complexity. And as with most street art, popularity and speed of production and ubiquity are prized above much else. His book, Wall and Peace, for instance, gives timings on how long it took to do the work. And generally, it's not very long. Speed is of the essence. So if one thinks about the contrast between aura and buzz in David Josselit's book, After Art, buzz being the kind of buzz of publicity and social media feeding, this is buzz in extremis. And the fact that on the old criteria for judgment, such crass work has been drawn into so many contemporary art collections, hanging alongside pieces by significant modernist and contemporary artists, indicates a quite deep shift in elite taste, I think. And elsewhere, I've tried to examine this populist trend in contemporary art. And street art shares many of its qualities, since it's simple in form and message, and demonstrates an enthusiastic, indeed often obsessive engagement with mass culture. It's delivered through branded artistic persona and sometimes gains wide popular appeal. So it's an art that shamelessly shows off to the viewer and sets out to entertain. Like advertising, street art is constitutionally parasitic, seizing on any visual icon, well-known comic cartoon figure Dennis the Menace here, any visual icon to mutate or combine with others in an attempt to seize the viewer's attention. It makes its own contribution to the pervasive sense of déjà vu that afflicts capitalist culture in its endless recycling and recombination of images. This is a painting by Mr. Brainwash, an artist who Banksy encouraged to market prominence, although he now claims to regret it. So competition is not only played out over size, prominence, and style, but over who can offer the wackiest vision. There's an interplay between the use of already famous figures and styles, comic book figures, superheroes, celebrities, visual icons, and the signature styles, especially of surrealism and pop art, and their unlikely combination. And if pop art, and particularly the figure of Andy Warhol, provide the obsession with fame and pure surface, the origin of the organization of social life as spectacle, Surrealism, which has long saturated advertising, provides its métier as street artists deal in attention-grabbing mutation, hybridization, and bizarre juxtaposition, as if Ovid's Metamorphosis was writ large across the cooler parts of the cooler cities across the globe. In 1929, Walter Benjamin presciently described surrealism as being at the crossroads of decadent spectacle and revolution, and these forms arguably contain the realization of spectacle and the ungerminated seeds of revolution. And in all this, we get a blurring too between street art and fine art, especially over bad painting and the strand of the taste of the super rich. So street art has become much more eclectic in style, and this painting, along with other media, generally more inaccessible to the rather uneducated tastes of those who have the funds to collect it. So the two begin to stylistically merge, and art fairs, of course, are full of this stuff. So street art does now have a product to sell in an arena via a global arena via social media. And most obviously that product is the bohemian artist, the figure, the foundational figure of the neoliberal branded commodity person. This is a painting of Dali, of course, by an artist called Zazu. Now, as we've seen, there's an ideal model of street art which speaks to the people and does so with the offer of a gift. This is Jimmy C again, I should say, which doesn't offer any demand for reciprocation, except perhaps the appreciative online sharing of a photo, and shows a sympathetic image of ordinary folk looking back at themselves. The vision of the people that is assembled in street art is, as we shall see, complex and often contradictory. But if we focus for a moment on the positive depictions of human figures, vision given is at once collective and diverse, and the two being squared because of the exposure of individuals to contingency and precarity, so that because of their precarious conditions, people's identities are not very fixed, especially among the young. Identities are necessarily fluid and plural, as seen in the many figures that blend human, mechanical, and vegetable forms and suggest constant mutation and adaptation. The address is to a broad section of the urban populace, the more so because an increasingly wide social swathe is exposed to precarity. And in this, the young are particularly marked sharply from many of their elders. The enemies are privilege, excessive wealth, the financial world, corporate propaganda, and the only people who are definitively excluded are the super rich and the political elites that serve them. So this, for instance, shows Boris Johnson as a monster clown figure, but also a puppet master of the pandemic. People below here in their masks, surrounded by crows or ravens. So the most common enemies of street art as they appear in British cities are logically Johnson, Nigel Farage of the Brexit Party, and Donald Trump. It's the Brexit leaders who are pilloried, never, so far as I've seen, their ordinary supporters. Now, unlike older depictions of the working class, for instance, in trade union banners, as here, this is not a people defined by labor. Figures are rarely seen working, or if they are, it's to critique work, as here. So, as I've said, there is some leftist utopian imagining of a world beyond work, at least implied in all this. And if this is a populism, then it's a pluralist one, on the model of Chantal Mouffe's attempt to reclaim populism for the left by defining a political enemy, and thus laying the ground to build a hegemonic offensive against the elite. And that point about antagonism, I think, about identifying enemy and a concrete enemy and acting against them is very important. We'll come back to it. And it's obviously a lesson that the far right has learned well, that the coalescence of a people, however conceived, needs a political opponent. These are some Brexit supporters who I photographed at a pro-EU demonstration. I had to stop photographing them because photographing them was obviously encouraging them. They seem to be here, very self-consciously conforming to type. The pluralist character of street art is apparently plainly apparent in its view of those populists who nostalgically characterize themselves as a pure and exclusive people by appealing to the supposed core values of national identity. And this people is entirely different to that posed in street art, white as opposed to multicultural, old versus young, small town and rural versus the big city. In a book that collects the views of London street artists in their many and various statements about the city, and they often express a love-hate relationship to the place, nearly every one praises its diversity. And Banks's funding of a boat to rescue migrants in the Mediterranean is symptomatic of this attitude. As when Reclaim the Streets held a street party on a motorway, planting trees into the tarmac, a common protest strategy is to behave as if the society one yearns to achieve already exists. Street art, especially in its illegal activities, does the same, offering a glimpse into a utopian and non-commercial culture. So that's the ideal, but it's constantly undermined by the various material conditions and social antagonisms that street art cannot wish away. Street art is most prevalent in those areas of the city that are, by no accident, most subject to the forces of gentrification. In London, for instance, if you walk from Plaistow in the Far East towards the border of the new waves of development in Stratford, it's clear that the line demarcating the territory of street art is sharply drawn. And equally, the divide between the city and the East End on either side of Commercial Street is equally abrupt and doubtless fiercely policed. So street art maps the realm of bohemia and gentrification alike, both of them feeding off a nostalgic falsification of working class cultures and histories. Another telling feature, which is connected with the elevation of the branded artist, is that the representations of the people, in these representations, figures are usually seen singly and rarely in groups. Their strength, such as it is, lies in self-possession, style, character, poise, and look. And while they may stand as emblems for more general circumstances, it's as individuals, it's implied, like the heroes of US movies. They stand alone. And if the ideal individual is the most positive and honorific style or type of depiction, there are many figures that don't reach full form, but rather struggle to emerge from lettering or other elements. And the parts that do appear are usually to do with vision and other appetites, eyes, teeth, tongues, mouths, occasionally genitals, or faces with a gross exaggeration of these features. And these depictions more than suggest that amid the intense commercialism that surrounds these works in the streets and online, and is a part of them, people may become reduced to a series of manic, fetishistic, and scopophilic drives. Oops. In another strand, monsters and animals that are often classed as vermin are depicted: zombies, werewolves, animated skeletons and skulls, and Frankenstein's creature, along with rats, foxes, pigeons, and cockroaches. All of this has a class inflection. A werewolf, an uncontrolled outburst of animal appetites, and a zombie, a slave gone rogue, appear more often than the aristocratic vampire. A prominent recent painting, some rats there. A prominent recent painting by Aspire in the East End is a telling exception it has Mark Zuckerberg as a vampire assigned to its conventional class position, bleeding people for their data. Banksy, who, along with many other well-known street artists, has made rats prominent in his work, makes the interest in vermin explicit. Rats, he writes, exist without permission. They're hunted, hated, and persecuted. They live in quiet desperation amongst the filth, and yet they're quite capable of bringing entire civilizations to their knees. Wishful thinking there. So if you're dirty, insignificant, and unloved, Banksy says, rats are the ultimate role model. So street art is clamorously and paradoxically populist and is directed towards an attempt to depict the people. It bears on a persistent dilemma from the time of the English Civil War, how or whether if to represent the people. When power inhered in a single person, as here in this portrait of Louis XIV, its depiction was relatively straightforward. How to depict popular sovereignty? The question of whether such a depiction should be attempted at all was bound up with Protestant iconoclasm, the suspicion of the spectacular thrall of kings, and the irrational charge of images generally. If it barely registers now, that objection, it is amid a triumphant, commercial, image-based spectacle, which is so pervasive that it's easy to be skeptical of the power of any single image. So JR, as we've seen, sidesteps the problem by offering photographic portraits of individuals. It's up to the viewer to decide how much they're taken to have a wider resonance. The opposite recourse is to use an allegorical figure, quite often female, to stand in for the force and virtue of the populace. In Delacroix's famed painting, Liberty Leading the People of 1830, the central figure is both an individual, Marie Deschamps, and a realistic representation of the insurgent populace. In times of active revolt, let alone revolution, the people can step into vivid depiction. So this is Giuseppe Bellizza de Volpedo's The Fourth Estate, Fourth State, 1901, based on a hunger protest. And of course, in the revolutionary state itself, the people are very regularly depicted. Here, Alexander Denika's The Don Basin of 1947. In the uprisings of the Arab Spring, street art in alliance with social media played a large role. And in such circumstances, a radically different art than the property developer-friendly street art of the neoliberal states emerged. It was swiftly identified as an enemy of the state, and its works were systematically erased and its makers jailed, or worse. This work by Latifa Eshakach, Crowd Fade of 2017, as shown at the Istanbul Biennial of that year, bears on both these issues. It's a distressed fresco arranged in a long, narrow, glum corridor in which the fragments of the people are dropped at the viewer's feet. In the neoliberal societies that are the focus of this analysis, even as their political establishments come into crisis and are met by a variety of populist tendencies, the long-term dilemma about how to depict the people persists. It's hardly surprising that the current identification of the people has its difficulties despite and because of the recent revival of political populism. And the problem is a deep one. If the people can't see and represent themselves as a collective, can they act as one? The very move from thinking about class to thinking about people may well signal powerlessness and a lack of political consciousness. As Eric Hobsbawm recently pointed out as long ago as 1978, in the UK, there was a sustained and long-term fall in the number of manual workers and the rise of white-collar and specialist technical workers, the ingress of many people into the workplace, and the failures of Labour governments, which all undermined what had been a quite homogenous working class consciousness. And it hardly needs saying that since then, working class power, and with it consciousness, have sharply declined. Beyond globalization, immigration, outsourcing, flexible working, and the direct assaults on the unions, we can point to the transformation of work by digitization, an increased precarity and mobility, the diversity of self-employment, and the common splitting of households across classes. And the effects in the UK have been tracked by Mike Savage and his collaborators in his project Social Class in the 21st Century, which show that in contrast to the 1950s, say, many people resist any kind of class identification. Class consciousness is most acute at either end of the spectrum among the rich and the underclass. Surveys found that resistance to class identification among other people was mainly to do with a belief in meritocracy, openness and individualism, and partly to do also with a desire to assert their own ordinariness and to resist snobbery. The class is acknowledged in a subterranean way in a scene in which inequality and precarity is rising, and especially through a harsh reaction against the supposedly fixed identities at both the top and the bottom. Beyond these changes, there's been a concerted ideological effort to suppress the very idea of class in a meritocratic view that Nancy Fraser has, in this short book, very good book, called progressive neoliberalism, in which the hierarchy was both diversified but also intensified. So class was a one divide that dare not speak its name, lest it be thought to disrupt the claims of equality across gender, sexuality, race, and disability. One way to get at the complexity and the rapidly changing character of class and work, and attempts at defining, or the attempts to define a new concept of class or something to replace it. And these have met with enormous difficulties. And in his book, The Class of the New, Richard Barbrook makes a very extensive chronological list of the terms that have been applied to the ruling class and the working class. I'm certainly not going to read this out to you, it would take a very long time, but I'll give you just a taste of some of these. So among the recent terms for the ruling class, the technocrats, the knowledge class, the postmodernists, the professional managerial class, the venture capitalists, the virtual class, the digerati, the swarm capitalists, the netocracy and the creative class. And for the workers, the postmodernists, the socialized workers, the white-collar proletariats, the nomads, the prosumers, the hackers, the cyborgs, the virtual class, the netizens, the digital artisans, and so on and so on. And the deep uncertainty that hangs around this issue is indicated by the overlap between the names of the commanders and the subalterns. Sometimes they're called the same thing. The people then becomes a placeholder for the lack of a sharper name. No wonder that its identity is continually shifting. This is a picture by Martin Parr, a well-known British photographer, taken on St. George's Day in 2017. So the reordering of the people under various ill-defined populisms compounds the problem. As Eric Hobsbawm pointed out, there's been a modified return to pre-capitalist consciousness with the recourse to a national people as against class. And this, as he says, can be seen as a sign of weakness and lack of clarity about the political enemy. One of the most ambitious and influential attempts to make sense of this configuration within the ambit of global power relations is Hart and Negri's analysis of the multitude in this book, Empire. And in this account, the multitude is bound together through immaterial labor that produces an immaterial good, a service, a cultural product, knowledge, or communication. Now that labor is highly diverse, taking in the informatized production of objects, data manipulation, and what they call effective services. Information processing, which permeates all production, leads to a homogenization of labor, they say, entwining the economy and communication so that cooperation becomes more important to the success of an enterprise than capital. Now, there'll be many critiques of this view, and doubts over whether such a diverse grouping can cohere and create solidarity amongst its various elements. let alone of any conceivable path of such a grouping to power. Do those working on menial micro tasks across Amazon's Mechanical Turk, care home workers, public relations consultants, personal trainers, and computer programmers really have enough in common to constitute a class, to recognize themselves and act as such, especially in a world fractured by gross inequalities between nations, often structured by racism and policed by harsh rules on immigration? Nevertheless, it is possible to apply the concept of immaterial labor to the dual character of street art. For one thing, the chronological development of graffiti and street art can be seen in terms of the introduction of immaterial labor to both. The material labor of working with paints in a particular place and of making a piece that is bound to its physical fabric, as against the immaterial labor of digital photographing, manipulating, and augmenting, tagging, publication, and sharing, and not just by the artist, but by other people as well. This shows you Shepard Fairey's Instagram page. So it's not only the final product, but the stages of the process are often shown. And while street artists once struggled to find information and images, techniques and a huge variety of examples are now open to anyone with access to an internet connection. So in this way, street art seems relatively novel, but there's another aspect of it which seems very old. It often seems reminiscent of the performance of class culture that E.P. Thompson describes, of a very different time, when the working class was still being born, in which each class segment, kept a wary eye on the other, so that despite the vast gulf between gentry and plebeians, he says rulers and crowd needed each other, watched each other, performed theatre and counter-theatre to each other's auditorium, moderated each other's behaviour. And as with Thompson's rough music, this strain of performed alienation and angry antagonism, far from the dignified culture of the proletarian movement with its ideal and allegorical figures, seems rather a performance of itself as an underclass, even among those who do not yet belong to it. The despised chav taking identity thrust upon it and turning it back on the establishment. You think that we are monsters and vermin? Well, here you are, we'll force you to look. In a recent book of photographs about the gentrification of London's East End, the photographer Doogie Wallace pays close attention to the way in which street art reflects and affects its subject's dress and bodily decorations. Wallace's figures, who sometimes mirror the paintings around them in gestures, pose, and expression, also appear as cartoon monsters performing their own decadence and degradation, not always ironically. If, like all subcultures, this one has been assimilated and its few stars loaded with fame and riches, it nevertheless drags behind it the spectacle of class antagonism, often, as I've said, on grounds of age as well, which Wallace often points to. This is a recent picture of a graffiti scene on Brick Lane, including a comment on the pandemic. So the effect of the whole, the busy parade of logos, monsters, vermin, hybrid creatures, ideal youths, brands, celebrities, and cartoons that cavort across walls in cooler parts of the city, is frenetic, needy, and restlessly changeable. In her book about the aesthetic categories of contemporary capitalism, Xian Gai describes forms that, when compared with the older forms, effects of the sublime and the beautiful, are effectively weaker, but at the same time, very pervasive across the entire culture. She calls these the zany, cute, and the interesting. Each corresponds to a moment in the capitalist commodity cycle, the cute to consumption, the interesting to distribution and circulation, and the zany to production and work. In Ngai's account, zany has its origin in the Renaissance era factotum, a jack of all trades, precarious and oscillating, as many comic figures do, between servility and mastery, incompetence and inspiration, constantly and speedily having to adapt to various incompatible demands. The figure provides a link to our contemporary precariousness and the extreme flexibility demanded by post-industrial capitalism. And Guy's modern examples are Lucille Ball, here at work on the right, and Jim Carrey in The Cable Guy. Both of them take on and cast off roles with manic rapidity, and both are under unremitting pressure. They're subjected by their excess of conformity to embarrassment and the sack, along with physical danger. Street artists are, as we've seen. The precarious character of their work spills over into their bodies and minds as they teeter on the brink of a pratfall or a nervous breakdown. Despite their extreme willingness, the zany's hyperactive gestures tend to be useless, so that its excruciating comedy bears upon the anarchic refusal to be productive, despite themselves in a sense. And for Nguy, the zany is the opposite of the robotic industrial worker, parodied here in Chaplin's film, Modern Times, and indeed of Henri Bergson's comic figure, who has so internalized mechanical routine that they fail to adapt to a vital and changing environment. So for Bergson, it's always a robot or the robotic character that's comic, especially if, for instance, he trips on the pavement because of too mechanical a step. But the zany is quite different. If the robot is a dead Fordist functionary, the zany character is comically overloaded with vitality and emotion, a cybernetic mechanism prey to overreaction. And indeed, cyborgs are more common than robots in street art and are more likely to suggest a comic or anguished dysfunction rather than a Terminator-like efficiency. Now, on the face of it, street art looks pretty zany. It's excessive, it's everywhere, it has that cartoon exaggeration, and collectively seems to be the product of a gross amount of hyperactivity. And it's relaying a cliche, celebrity figures and common symbols in a conventional style. It's hyperconformist too. Yet an immediate difficulty of applying the zany to street art is the individually, each of its practitioners might be thought to behave more like a robot than a jack of all trades. Their strength is in the repetition of a branded identity and a relatively unvarying signature style. So the work of Shepard Fairey self-consciously performs this conformity by obsessively repeating his unchanging obey slogan. It's incidentally taken from a B-movie by John Carpenter, They Live, in which skeletal aliens use subliminal messages to induce universal consumer quiescence. However, even graffiti, which elevates repetition and ubiquity over style, is not robotic, since its mark-making is calligraphic, and its forms are forged through bodily tuning and adaptation to the environment. With street art, while signature style is crucial to rapid recognition, variation and creativity, along with sensitivity to sight, is favored. And it's as a collective activity in the environment that it creates that street art becomes zany. And this is how it's mostly viewed, not as an individual performance and work, but as an urban scene. Its needy, busy, and attention-grabbing character to some extent explain people's frequent resistance to this art, even among those who don't condemn it out of hand as criminal damage. As Nguy notes, there's something fundamentally labored, anti-comical, and even pathological about the zany. And this is seen in the many instances in which street art figures shed droplets, paint of course, but also I think sweat. A ferocious ethic underlies both graffiti and street art. as Guy suggests in its blurring of work and play, which is surely suggestive of street art's demands to always produce a greater size, number, and prominence. Quite often it's artists, as here, both self-represented as a rat, of course, but as an exhausted rat at that. In the cross-contamination of work and leisure that is a key feature of immaterial labour, and of which street art and graffiti have become exemplary, there's a linked decline in the quality of aesthetic experience, a shrinking capacity to see and hold form in the mind. As in a walk down each street, the sensibility is repeatedly bludgeoned. The dream of the avant-garde was, of course, to unite art and life so that life would be saturated with the aesthetic and indistinguishable from it. But not quite like this, where the price of ubiquity is also failure and chaos. Zany failure then may extend to the coming into consciousness of the people, let alone of class. And at this juncture, returning to Georg Lukács's classic 1923 text on the emergence of working class consciousness is a chastening experience. His vision is of a proletariat transcending its narrow economic interests in favor of a universal movement towards democracy and control over work, and fixing on radical change, for instance, not to improve wages, but to abolish the wage system. Worse is his dire warning of the consequences should that consciousness fail to mature. On it hangs, he says, nothing less than the fate of mankind. This scenario, if not the envisaged catastrophe, is utterly remote from our reality, in which even the defense of wage levels seems utopian. It does, though, lead the reader away from any temptation to idealize the previous peak of working class power, which was focused on consumption and wage demands, and rarely lifted its view beyond the national. Now that's a pretty bleak conclusion, I'm afraid. Does the pandemic do anything to temper it? One would think that with lockdowns, with travel and collaboration being harder, that the balance between immaterial and material labour would shift towards immaterial labour. I should say that there's little firm evidence or analysis as yet in relationship to street art, and that this subject would be very difficult to research systematically, sharing the nebulous character of grasping street art as a whole. Showing you here a recent piece called by Scene K26, Stay Strong, celebration of health workers. But we can say that online art sales have generally risen through the pandemic. Sotheby's, for instance, has seen a 10-fold increase in its online sales. Christie's have also reported strong figures with lots of new buyers coming into the market, especially the young, through online auctions. Banksy did this work, again, celebrating health workers, become superheroes, a common move, as we'll see, and gave it to Southampton General Hospital. There it is in situ. Banksy apparently is said to be making more money through online sales during the pandemic as well, which may be what one would expect, but it's also a claim to be treated with caution, I think, given his team's considerable PR skills. Street artists have been active through the pandemic, despite complaints about increased police activity against them and increased surveillance. But the results are generally simplistic, consensual, and little fixed on immaterial labour as a category, of which, of course, health workers are a part. So this by Lionel Stanhope, done near Waterloo Station and with the collaboration of Network Rail, the company that runs rail infrastructure in the UK. So in the UK, for example, there's lots of celebration of the NHS and its workers, often figured as superheroes, and they should be celebrated, don't get me wrong, as should a free universal health service, despite all government attempts to ruin it. but there's little idea of the connection of its workers to others as a class, to all the people who are at considerable risk to themselves that kept society running. And generally, not very much antagonism either, or the identification of an enemy. It does happen occasionally. This is Ira Okrespu showing Bolsonaro's attempt at face mask. Or in London, K-Guy talking about the lack of testing in the UK, so pointing towards conservative governments' incompetence or feigned concern for ordinary folk. But generally it seems that the kind of we're all in this together line has held, at least on British streets. And I think this is in marked contrast to some of the other artistic interventions. For instance, at the South Bank Centre with its series Everyday Heroes, celebrating, for instance, bus drivers. So this is something called Stephen, taken in London in 2020 by the well-known photographer Jürgen Teller. And it's in marked contrast too, I think, with the many street art works done around Black Lives Matter following the death of George Floyd. The point of antagonism is put very well, I think, in this provocation, also on the South Bank, by Jeremy Deller. So the idea is that the NHS, which is heavily staffed by people of colour and migrants, will be having to treat the recalcitrant white folk, I suppose. So the conclusion might seem to be this: crisis alone is not enough to condense the idea of a people visually or conceptually. For that to happen, they must identify a foe and act against it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julian. Thank you for your very inspiring speech. So for the attendees, if you have any question, you can use the question and answer tab. Ahmet Ergenç, so you can write your question there, the question and answer tab.
I hope it was clear and the sound worked all right. I know it's quite a dense talk. There was quite a lot in it.
Mm-hmm. I think there is not any question. So thank you very much, Julian. So I think we can finish the session. If our attendees don't have any question, let me check again, sorry. Yeah. There is a question. Can you see the question and answer tab under the screen? How about Banksy and critics against him?
I see. Hang on. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I was looking at.
Yeah. Question and answer.
Okay.
A classical question. How about Banksy and the critics against him? One of the attendees is asking.
Yeah, I mean, there's Banksy is a very divisive figure in himself, and obviously there are many art critics who despise his work, and for very obvious reasons. As I say, its success really points to a deep shift in the way in which distinction is sort of formed in the art world. and certainly many people who hold to the old values criticize Banksy on, perfectly reasonable grounds of lack of complexity or interest, and indeed for his very simplistic, arguably simplistic political views as well. I mean, they're radical in the sense that he's strongly opposed to racism and holds to kind of socialist values, but they are expressed in a very simple way. He's also a divisive figure among street artists because really because of his success, I suppose, and the way in which he is, so effective at appealing to the media, gaining controversy, staging media events. So although he's done and continually strives to be accepted by that world and has put on street art festivals, supports many street artists, and wants he wants his work to be seen as vandalism still, that position is rejected by many people.
Well, thank you. Is there any other question? Well, I think not. So thank you again, Julian. Thank you very much for your participation in our online conference. So we can go to the next session, Ebru.
Well, thank you, Professor Stelebas. It's been very, very pleasant for me to gather around in the streets of London at the stage of the pandemic. It's been a pleasure to have you, and we're honored to have you in our conference. Now, I kindly would like to announce that we will have a break for 30 minutes, and we will come back with our first session at precisely 2:30. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Thank you.
Evet, biliyorsunuz etiketimiz biz varız. Biz varız etiketimize gelen birkaç mesajı size okumaya çalışayım. Özellikle Ayşe Uçar. Ayşe Uçar bizim yani çok kıymetli bir izleyicimiz, aynı zamanda her türlü mesajıyla, icraatlarıyla bize de çok büyük destek veriyor. Diyor ki, biz varız, Gazi Mustafa Kemal Atatürk'ün sevgi ve saygısıyla kadın olan, insan olan ben varım, minnettarım diyor. Bu arada Zeynep'le iki siz de varsınız demiş. Çok teşekkürler kendisine. Nazo mesajı ismini kullanan bir paylaşımcı, Twitter paylaşımcısı diyor ki, herkese öfkeni yen kadınlar vardır. İstanbul Sözleşmesi'ni kurar. Çünkü İstanbul Sözleşmesi yaşatır. Çünkü istiyoruz parmak sallayıp azarlamakta kadına şiddete son veremezsiniz demiş. Biz varız İstanbul Sözleşmesi'ni acil uygula demiş aynı zamanda. Kadınlar vardır diye de eklemiş. Nazo. Kendilerine teşekkür ederim. Mesajlar geldikçe size buraya aktarmaya devam edeceğim. Şimdi Türkiye'deki koronavirüs salgınıyla mücadele konusuna biraz geçelim. Biliyorsunuz rakamlar konusunda artık televizyonun bir tavrı var. Bu tavır eğer Türkvaz tavrı vermiyoruz. Versek bile rakamlarını en azından sizin bilginiz olsun diye en az şeklindeki bir kelimeye ekleyelim diyoruz. Yani
Shall we begin?
en az
Hey,
All right.
it's perfect now. How are you?
Good. You?
Good. Fine. Yes, because I have the lesson with my students in this day. It's more complex to search the time for the conference, to write the book, etc. You? It's good.
Yeah. It's actually really great to get together, even in this environment.
Yeah.
Mm. All right, dear all, welcome to the first session of Art World Refleksler and Alternative New World AICA online conference. I'm the moderator of this session. My name is Ebru Yetişkin Doğrusöz. I'm a sociologist, curator, and art critic working especially on digital culture. So before we begin, let me share a few words that might hopefully make a small introduction for our session. As we have all forced to experience the opportunities and restrictions of digital tools, perhaps more than ever during the pandemic, we have also experienced and observed that many artists, art institutions, art initiatives, and art events have migrated to online platforms, some might say at last. Some also adopted a rejective position for various reasons. Collections, art fairs, auctions, and exhibitions were moved and open to online visitors, some of which have explored these cultural sources for the first time in their lives. As all crises, the pandemic emerged both as an accelerator and a regressive social fact in the art world. Whereas in some countries, art actors and art institutions were supported by their governments. And in some countries, as in Turkey, the practices of art and culture have been banned and frozen for health and safety reasons, unfortunately. As we're still in the first and the second waves of the pandemic, some experts claim that the effects of the third wave, especially, will be more psychological rather than physiological. Let us hope that we can develop collective actions, common solutions, and adopt emerging opportunities in solidarity in these times of radical change. So with these brief thoughts in my mind, I'm honored to present you our four speakers today: Beral Madra, Gabriele Romeo, Efe Korkut Kurt, and Müge Ertan. Last but not least, we begin with our first speaker, I'd like to remind all participants of the conference that we will have a discussion session after all the presentations, and so that please stay tuned and save your questions and comments in the last section, which will be around 10 to 4 and 4:20 this afternoon. Now let us welcome Beral Madra in COVID, post-COVID.
Thank you, Ebru. Yes, the title is also my experience. I mean, since 8 months I am confined because my age is on the risk level, so I have to be very careful and live through all the regulations, which are really very difficult. And you just mentioned the psychological issue, which is really true. I mean, physically, yes, of course, we have to keep ourselves safe, but psychologically is another situation that we have to deal with. So, we are living in an uncanny life condition that has not been experienced in the global context, at least from the Second World War to the present. We are in an environment that is far from the social economic order we are used to, and we are trying to survive with physical restraint, spiritual loneliness, global uncertainty, and anxiety. Just before this pandemic, the socio-political order we are going through has been named as post-truth, which is another trouble we have to deal with. We are witnessing that political and economic powers intervene in every angle of individual and social life, and particularly to our basic belief in truth. And this pandemic provoked this intervention. We are also experiencing the towards a new rigidity, which is called zombie capitalism by experts. It is not accurate to speculate, but in traditional Turkish saying, it is the visible village does not require a guide. We are on a threshold. Either we are heading towards an uncanny future, or we will restore the transgressions we have created until now. There is a transition from face-to-face and close communication order to confined and distant order. There is a transition from community life to singular life. Home has become much more private and closed than before. Nobody is allowed in. The unusual order is urgently adopted, and it will be experienced for an unknown period. Political and economic activity is also being structured according to this big deadlock. Maybe I'm sounding too pessimistic, but at the end I will be optimistic, don't worry. Against the imposing command of post-truth, the naked truth shows its reality. As COVID-19 is causing a turmoil on global politics, economy, and social and individual life, one of the hardest hit sectors is the art and culture industry, at least in our region. The forced closure of art and culture venues, galleries, the hesitancy of collectors, the reduction of donations and investments in art and culture, the shrinking culture job market, as well as academic assets, are the first signs of the coming depression. In countries with democratic, social, and culture industry deficits, the main function and responsibility of contemporary art and culture productions is to give a critical view to the society, to improve their power of perception and opposition. As freedom of expression is under the surveillance of the ruling powers in many countries, contemporary artworks are the most truthful and effective tool of resistance against the post-truth ideologies which nourish the society with distorted information. Coronavirus episode is positively serving the world with digital tools to find ways to better manage the global communication and exchange in culture and art. However, it also restricts the face-to-face possibilities, travel and hosting facilities. Let us point out that there are big differences between countries concerning the art and culture industries and policies. The state of affairs in culture and art is somehow different west of Vienna, starting from Turkey. 1987-2012 was a jubilation period for Turkey's contemporary art scene. The joy of Istanbul being hotspot of contemporary art in between two continents, Europe and Asia, during these 25 years occurred because of the apparently expected positive developments regarding the political and economic image of Turkey and its integration process to European Union. Looking to the current state of affairs, we can say that Turkey seems not to have a reliable political and economic development, and the related social and cultural systems are in jeopardy. In particular, the contemporary art and culture scene. However, contemporary artists, art experts, producing significant artworks and art and culture actions and activities in Turkey and also in the region, the private institutions or individual initiatives are determinedly effective in fulfilling the cultural aims and intentions. What are these cultural aims and intentions? A clear and unbiased vision towards democratic transformation, freedom of expression and communication, respect to pluralism, human and gender rights, responsibility on ecological problems, development of public awareness. Visual artists with their aesthetically qualified, conceptually competent artworks are widely and strongly enriching the visual production, and to my joy, women artists are on the front of this production, in Turkey as well as in our region. In this region, all these principles are currently struggling towards democratic processes and resisting the upcoming autocratic regimes and other traumas. Within this context, how the artists and art experts profit from their production, or rather how they survive, is a crucial and leading question. Most of the artists work in the universities, in graphic design companies, or open art studios for the public. With any luck, a small number of them have family support or private income. Private galleries occasionally employ curators. The museum or private sector art and culture quantity is not enough to meet the employment demands. Besides, they prefer to run their institution with low wage. AICA Türkiye announces every year the new wage list to confront this low wage deficit. We observe that artists are looking for opportunities to live and work abroad, which currently is not a possible option. We are aware that under the current political and economic conditions in Turkey and in the region, it will be a struggle to continue and strengthen the socio-cultural and artistic endeavors and productions. The alleged theoretical and intellectual consequences, deficits, and benefits of this unpredictable moment should be discussed among artists and art experts in communication with international partners and supporters, as we are doing now. Therefore, this conference is quite crucial. This dialogue is even more important if it is based in the program and activities of the existing independent NGOs and not to be handed over a branded consortium of public and private funding, which would not be very reliable in accepting the absolute freedom and independence of the artists and art experts. As journalism is under surveillance of the ruling powers, this is the art and culture seems to be the most effective tool of resistance against these post-truth ideologies, which give all the time the distorted information. This aspect, which is currently almost the only way to expand the European Union democratic principles to its eastern neighboring countries, should not be neglected or ignored. Governments in European Union consider the creation of emergency funds that can be used to support their art and culture organizations. This is not the case in Turkey at the moment, and not the case in the other eastern neighboring countries. The inherent risks and multifaceted effects of this hardship on local art and culture organizations is predictable. We need support, solidarity, communication, and collaboration from European Union institutions and NGOs and funds. I hope our voice will be heard by all the responsible persons in European Union and in other democratically powerful countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Beral Madra. You highlighted pretty much very important issues, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. And now I'll give you the word to our second speaker, Gabriele Romeo, Phenomena Post-COVID-19. Gabriele. Hello, back.
Okay. Okay. Now, good morning, everyone. Now I have my little presentation for us. Now, this, yes. This is a phenomena about the post-COVID-19. This is more complex because we have different problems in Italy and in the society. For example, the theme, this is the different theme, this conference. The Fortuny case, Fortuny is more important artist around the world. This is my research during my history of applied arts lessons during the lockdown. Yes, because in the month of March and May, together with the student of the Albertina Academy of Fine Arts in Turin, I'm a teacher in this institution. We studied the biography of famous Mariano Fortuny Madrazo. Has been studied in depth thanks to the official Instagram page of the Fortuny Houses Museum, established in 1975 and temporarily closed. This is the gross problem for the heritage, cultural heritage in Italy for the museum. We provided together the Dr. Cristina Darroit, she's the curator inside the museum, to digitize the archival material to then be used in the visual processing by the student. This is different work there. My student work, the different dress in particular. This is the museum of the Mariano Fortuny Madrazo in San Benedetto in Venice. The other, yes, this is a more particular situation about the European society for the image. Banksy, game changer for the Southampton General Hospital in England, in the face of what has occurred in the news of a recent month. We have seen the artist's social behavior being questioned in forms of solidarity. Creativity has taken the form of metaphors to exasperate, share, and enhance a sense of common dispersion linked to the dramatic concept of like and hope. This is personified enunciation of the collectivity. Now we have the toy, we have the different in the first, yes, in the first image. In this is possible, to analyze the different compilation for the semantic analysis inside the artwork, because it's important. The dungarees that the child wears calls for work. The dungaree is a typical custom of the work. It's a testimonial of the work. But the nurse in the hospital have been indispensable from doctors to nurse. The toy is the new vanity of this society. For way superheroes such as Batman, Spider-Man demonstrate that the fate of a human artifice. Now, this is another consideration about the blackboard, yes, because we have the smart working, we have a different system for the communication. When an art expressed by remember teaching in the presence, it's more important because I have a lot of time, a different hour in the screen with never my classroom, my students. It's more different. Marshall McLuhan was still there. He will try to find an answer to what is happening on a global sociological level and didactics in the school world, in the need for the contact.
Gabriel, can I interrupt you? I'm really sorry. Would it be possible to widen the screen a little bit?
Yes,
so that
yes.
maybe for those who have crooked eyes like me, we can see much better of your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, now. Don't
Cool.
worry.
Thank you.
Young people are living through and reading books less and less, and the kids of the millennial generation shake their devices. I try to understand the behaviors of the artists on the net recently. I discovered Ethan Regak's research, and I thought about the iconic image of the blackboard in the collective imagination. A class in ancient setting, the one witnessed in the Musée de l'École de la Royale, is almost nostalgic. The MacBook becomes my book. The French artist creates an installation using ancient books from 1869 to 1883. In this way, it generates a relational, emotional, multiple interactive space, a time machine that both Gutenberg and Jobs would surely have liked it. The slate blackboard does not escape this operation. It's not a digital tablet. It represents a sign, mimic, and behavioral testimony of the teacher. You use it. In Italy, we remember the great teacher, Alberto Manzi, who in a historical television broadcast by Rai, Non è mai troppo tardi, it's never too late. It's the program from 1960 to 1968. 4 millions of Italians to read and to write. The great artist Bruno Bunari also used the slate blackboard in the lessons and the numerous lectures to express the context of his lessons with eloquent elegance. Yes, this is Regac's research. Alberto Mansi in the oldest program for broadcast television in Italy. This is my embroidery for the lockdown. This is first for the logo of the Biennale of the Venice. This is the different educational program of the Biennale in this month, for example. Now, this is more interesting because this is my analysis about the mask as human protection. Because, one moment, yes. In 1942, close the nuclear problems caused by the Second World War, Walt Disney designed a gas mask, which as well seen today appears an installation, an assemblage placed on the cylindrical frame that remains as of the murdered artista by Piero Manzoni and the Wars Campbell's soft canes. These canes remind us of the hard month of the lockdown, the food, the nutrition, the people who scrambled to buy pasta, meat, drinks, basic necessities for the very long periods of quarantine. These were the images entered on the television broadcast, advertisement, etc. Showy and bulky from the aesthetic point of view, it resembled in dry and real appearance the many mannequins of Edward Kenny's. Is a sexuet mannequins, for example, because universal, yes. The Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse is in the double face. It's dramatic, like the masks that were produced in that historical moment had anticipated the serial commercialization of those we know from the COVID-2019 pandemic that exploded all over the world. Of course, today we are witnessing a stylist design approved taught by the digital mass media that replace print paper, newspaper, the choice of analog. Minimal and functional, the mask with their minimal design explode, making their on the languages of pop culture that we can observe in the digital communication of the great giants like Walt Disney. Facial signage of the new post-Lombroso anthropology to the Italian illustration of Pimpa, published in Instagram. They have adapted in the recent month several museums together with the languages creating multiple variable gadgets. In the digital network, the web exploded with images of people who self-portray themselves in selfies, often absurd poses, which seem to challenge the signs of that European F-passport, which has been discussed so much since October for safe travel. We are reported. Word versus image is another theme. Yes. This is the MoCA Museum in Los Angeles. It's more interesting because the museum meet together the different artists of the time, Fluxus artist, Yoko Ono. It's more complex because we have the gadget, new gadget of humanity. I'm sorry. Yes. Uh, the gadget with sophisticated design in a very short time becomes so viral that it floods the channel with the sharing of posts depicting the selfies of many followers. We proudly exhibit the trophy, the mask of this new social custom. Perhaps our disguised minimal mask will be able to heal the wounds of the pandemic as happened in the 14th century for the plague with the zoomorphic and log book used in iconography received from the doctor of the plague, for example. A sign of evasion of the radiation and the new dressing for the daily outings after the lockdown, the mask in the objective psychosis of the wearer wants to observe an emphatic tool for inhibited dialogue with their interlocutor, from a bar table drinking a spritz with friends to the aggregation mask and of teenager reproducing DIY images of taken from the repellent test of kitsch and divide on aesthetic and or semantic connotations. Yes. This is the opening the last 20 August about the Venice Biennale. This is the first time I'm now inside. We have only 5 curators of different section because dance, music, theater, or they work together for this historical exhibition, because we have a fish or papers, different archive document, and this is a historical exhibition because no only architecture because delayed for the COVID pandemic. Now we have the inauguration. We have Cecilia Alemani, she's curator of the art section. Together the mayor of the city and the new president, because changed before we have the Paolo Baratta, now is Roberto Ciccuto, the new president for the Biennale. Now, this is an forum in Italy. It's more important because we have for example, Lorenzo Balbi is the curator of the Mambo in Bologna. It's different people to speak together about the problem for the budget, for the money in the culture, in this different situation. It's more complex. Because in Italy we have a system very complex about the helped the community. Yes. This is creativity, Italian creativity past and future. It's the virtual exhibition dedicated to the excellence of the high Italian artistic education system, different academy of a European system, and the different ministries of the culture for the conference of that I think about the last week in Italy. It's a virtual gallery. We have different system for the multimedia language. this is Paola Gribaudo. This is a book for with Paola Gribaudo. She's an art historian, critic. She produced this book with together about 100 artists, other people for the different presence about the COVID. Now that the title now is condividere, follower is the translator. Yes. She's an Italian artist, Laura Valle. She produced, this is more emblematic for Italy. We have the diagram about the different people for discharge, health, deceased about the COVID. And finally, this is millennial generation, Marco Abrate, Ribor. This is the pink position, the pink home of the humanity. Yes. Now I finish. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriele. It's been a pleasure to see the recent developments in the art world, focusing especially on Italy, I think. Now we move to our third speaker, Efe Korkut Kurt. I think Efe Korkut Kurt will be referring to the Lacanian readings and the crisis in the economic infrastructure of the art production, and define some crisis. His talk is entitled "Pandemic as a Symptom and its Effect on Art and Culture in the Context of Intersubjectivity." Efe Korkut Kurt.
Merhaba.
Okay, hello, Efe Korkut Kurt.
Hello, how are you?
Good, you?
Thank you very much. I guess, I hope everybody is fine there. Okay, first of all, I would like to express my happiness for being one of the speakers of this conference. I believe that the will to produce constructive and positive results regarding the troubled situation that we live in now in the whole world is put forward here. Can we see our presentation there? Yes, I guess. Okay. I prefer to approach the situation that emerged with the pandemic from a psychoanalytic perspective. I don't think there will be a better time to use psychoanalysis in the field of art and culture. With the pandemic, all the people of the world went through an extraordinary period. That epidemic caused the modern health infrastructure in the countries to go into crisis, while first shaking the global system. There's a general consensus that the problems emerge here make economic and social costs directly felt on societies, and also cause psychological and even existential effects on the people. These multi-layered effects occur in terms of both tangible material results and also spiritual effects on the actors who carry out cultural production. In this statement, I will consider these multi-layered effects in the context of Lacanian psychoanalytic theory and give a view on what kind of dynamics the emerging situation and the process associated with bring to the agenda in terms of intersubjectivity. At this point, I'll use psychoanalytic theory not as a method of analysis, of course, but as a tool to reveal various possible reflections of Lacan's idea of the subject and the related unconscious on the field of art and culture. Here I will consider the prominent concepts such as anxiety, uncanny, symptom, real, desire, pleasure, death, the other, in the simplified forms, in the context of the existing situation. I'll present it as open-ended thoughts rather than making sharp conclusions. First, let's focus on Lacan's subject theory, which we will maybe get a little bit bored here, but we need to understand what's happening because if you don't understand the basic concepts of the psychoanalytic theory, we cannot go forward to the new ideas emerging from here. The foundation of modern concept subject dates back to Descartes. The subject expressed by Descartes is the one who distinguishes himself from the self-not, the one who is conscious of the self. It was Freud's psychoanalytic theory that broke this understanding, as we know. It was sometimes seen as the end of the modern philosophy also. According to this theory, the basis of this subject is unconscious. Lacan has put forward a more detailed theory by which we can understand the dynamics of this unconscious subject. Accordingly, the subject is established over his lack and alienated from himself. By entering the language, becoming a subject, of course, the person loses his completeness and recognizes himself only through the other. This deficiency functions as the basic dynamic of one's relationship with the entire world of objects, as the production of desire. In other words, the subject cannot recognize him or herself without the other and loses its vital functions. Freud said that a rational mind, which is taught to be able to understand the world and therefore control it, is in fact subject to an irrational content that is timeless, undated, and free from causality. The unconscious desires are the leading regulator of thought, action, and social relations. And human beings exist not autonomously, but as a part of social structures also. This point of view has brought a new perspective where the whole society can be handled from the beginning. What is so-called reality that we think we have come to terms with the social sphere? That is what is reality. The question cannot be understood independently of the question of what the subject is. There is no universe or situation for the subject to be identical to itself. According to Lacan, alienation is the structural precondition of subjectivity. It is the symbolic order that constitutes the subject. The symbolic order is established as a subject when it gives a person the opportunity to say I, that is to represent himself with a signifier. As Lacan said, the subject is born as a signifier in symbolism. In this respect, the consistent and safe continuity of the symbolic is an important condition for the subject to express himself as he thinks he knows himself. So what does the ego crisis that comes to the fore when this condition is weakened? This is one of our main questions today. Here we must first dwell on how critical it is for the subject to know him or herself through the other. To summarize briefly, in order to keep the first perception of physical incompatibility before the mirror alive in the mind, the body that appears fragmented and cluttered and the anxiety that arises with the moment causes the desire to have a safe me. This part is important because here the subject wants to construct himself. Faced with his or her disorder, the subject seeks ways to overcome this situation. The way to get off this disorder is thanks to the fact that it captures in the image of the other standing. The subject gets rid of incompatibility by establishing a connection with the disorder outside himself, his alienation with what he is radically aligned to. According to Lacan, subject desires to be desired, and desire of the subject is the desire of the other. Lacan uses the concept, the name of the father, for the symbolic father. By learning the role of the symbolic father, the child begins to understand his own cultural position. With the Oedipus complex, as we know, the symbolic realm is entered and the establishment of the subject takes place. The child breaks away from the holistic reality, moves toward being human in the symbolic realm. Oedipus complex, it causes a feeling of division between one's own reality and the idea of the reality. And the subject who starts to think with the symbols of the cultural order becomes alienated from his own reality. The primary effects of this alienation produce the conditions of a multi-layered existence in the adult individual. This situation is to contain many elements that are complex, full of contradictions and conflicts. In this respect, the relationship established with all human beings, these are cultural productions, cannot be free from the neurotic content in the Freudian sense. This issue is important because the whole cultural field especially refers to the father's gaze. What is the position of the artist here? My personal opinion is the artist predominantly takes a position as a hysteric. Of course, sometimes it settles in the position of the obsessive or even perverted too. Sometimes, however, in whatever field it's located, the desire of the artist subject needs the big other, and naturally the unconscious representation of the big other take place predominantly through authority figures. This can be the state, capital, actors who have a say in the field, etc. Of course, we know all these. Today, these figures are weakening their place in the symbolic area as a result of obscurity, risk, and inadequacy brought by the pandemic, as a result of what comes to the fore here. An hysteric uprising or an obsessive expiration will not arise as it is supposed to. Rather, depression and withdrawal from life should be expected because desire is disabled. According to Zizek, the other's rule over the subject depends on the fantasy. The subject is under the authority of the other because they contain within self a precious set of phantasmatic building blocks approved by the other. The subject values this enough to give up his or her freedom. Every encounter of the subject with the real will be traumatic. The point where the symbolic order fails begins the potential to transform into a traumatic but constitutive quality of the subject. What fantasy staged is a scene in which our desire is fulfilled, but on the contrary, the creation of a scene that fulfills the desire itself. What psychoanalysis is basically saying is that the desire is not something given in advance, but something to be constructed, giving the coordinates of the subject's desire, determining the position the subject assumes within it is precisely the role of the fantasy. The subject is established only as a desired subject through fantasy. Through fantasy, we learn to desire. there must be a continuous distance and unbearable gap between desire and its object. Therefore, the task of the images is to cover up the loss, and while remaining to reverse the mourning and to enjoy the space itself. The ability of late capitalism is that it succeeds to correspond a consumption culture on a social scale. Here, almost all fields of art, including the avant-garde, have become completed. What is happening now is the system which has received what it wants from this cooperation with art and culture, opens new and fresh channels for itself in virtual spaces, leaving behind conventional cultural productions. Lacan says that the child involved in the symbol realizes two basic situations. The first of these is the formation of unconscious, and the second, the establishment of the individual subject, as we mentioned before. As emphasized, the Oedipus complex, the prohibition of the natural relationship between mother and the child is resolved by transforming the unconscious desire born with the prohibition in new imaginary expressions with the name of the father. The child thus acquires social forms and becomes an individual subject. So entry in the symbolic order is possible through the realization of the original suppression. It is inherent in dynamics of desire of the subject and paternal tensions that will produce the most fundamental concerns that generate these dynamics. The multi-layered unconscious benefited by these dynamics corresponds to an emotional situation that works on the imaginary and symbolic level. Here it would be appreciated to approach the issue through the anxiety neurosis, because according to Lacan, the cornerstone of the development, the dynamics of the subject is anxiety. Anxiety refers to the symptomatic outcome of the paternal processes that occur with the birth of the child. We come to the Heidegger's approach to existence here, also parallel to Freud's psychoanalytic theory. For Heidegger, existence refers to a mode of being, the existence of being, and stands open for the clarity of the being in which he endures. He calls this enduring experience anxiety. In being in time, anxiety is accepted as the essence of the existence of design, and the design's being in the world-based structure. Anxiety is not an effect, it's the essence of the structure. So the issue here is not a pathology, but the situation. In other words, anxiety is no longer a common affection, but a part of existence. The continuity of anxiety, which is the main line of our existence in philosophical terms, and the basic dynamics and symptom of subjectuation in psychoanalytic terms, can be accepted as the basics of the reading the process we live in. Here, the creative consequences of this come to our agenda. The inhibiting effect of the anxiety created by the pandemic also triggers a traumatic experience with increased awareness on individuals. The memory of the experience can manifest itself in cultural productions at the point where the crisis is left behind. Lacan is known for speculating on the process of the subject's emergence, centering on the idea of the constructive lack. Zizek states that Marx was the first to invent the symptom, and Freud, inspired by Marx, brought this concept to psychoanalysis. And a symptom of an alignment has long been seen as a pathological condition resulting from a malfunction in a healthy, normal physiological function, healthy processes could not function normally as before with the invention of an external factor like infection, trauma, cancer, etc. And the painful and deformed appearance emerged. In a medical sense, the symptom was a pathological excess and has to be dealt with directly with the excess treatment. However, in Freud's psychic machine, the symptom was not treated as a pathological excess. Unlike the excess, the symptom was taken as an attempt to find a way out, the perceived appearance of spiritual recognition that emerged as a result of conflicts between processes related to the fluidity of spiritual energies. In this respect, the symptom, like dreams, was the royal road to the subject's unconscious. As stated earlier, Lacan went up one step further and stated that the symptom should be treated as an expression of the constitutive deficiency in the subject. According to Lacan, the subject did not have a complete and holistic structure from the beginning. That's why he or she desires. Here, we see from an analogical perspective how the pandemic has turned into a symptom of modern life, especially in the consumption-centered social of late capitalism. While the fantasy we set up with the pandemic was shaken, the total fragility of the elements of the modern disciplinary society became visible. While the hospitals were inadequate, schools were closed, some of the prisons were evacuated, cities became uncomfortable, the rural areas are preferred. With the question that arose here, the institutions of the field of art and culture, which are largely the superstructural institutions of modernism, their production practices are related forms of relations were similarly upset. Theaters and cinemas are closed. Concerts and exhibitions are cancelled. Bookstores remained without customers. Instead, it was seen that virtual areas and digital platforms took over. Somewhat comically and partly tragically, it was the embodiment of many postmodernist debates. The fact that what came up here turned the institutions of enlightenment into antiques has shown that here is not much room for futile efforts such as turning exhibitions into virtual tours. A dramatic picture of what this new normal will include and what it will eliminate. The symptom here may be the harbinger of a fatal disease. Thank you very much. I hope it was not a presentation full of psychoanalytic terms. Thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Efe Korkutkurt. We will have the questions at the end of our session. And let me announce and remind all of the participants and the attendees of this session. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and during the presentations, you can write your questions and write your comments. So that we can have a discussion time, so that you will have time to think about your questions, so that we will have a fruitful talk. Now I will give the floor to Müge Erten, and she will be talking about a new paradigm in art. Welcome, Müge.
Hello, everyone. My name is Müge. I graduated philosophy in Mimar Sinan University. And I'm in a master program, Design, Technology and Society in Özyeğin University. I share my screen. My presentation name is A New Paradigm in Art. My content is, according to Thomas Kuhn, what is the paradigm shift? And the other one is paradigm shift in art. I distinguished normal and anomaly, and normal period in contemporary art. The other one is anomalies and paradigm shift in contemporary art. And my hypothesis is new art paradigm is digital. And finally, new paradigm and COVID impacts. And finally, conclusion is evolution of the aura. I applied Thomas Kuhn's scientific paradigm shift methodology to art. And what is paradigm shift? The new problematics in science is understood according to a current paradigm, but when new developments are seen as anomalies after a while, a paradigm shift occurs. Thus, a new perspective enables us to understand new developments. Since new developments, for example, in science could not be explained according to Newtonian absolutist paradigm, it's seen as an anomaly and they accumulate. After the Einstein's relativity paradigm shift, new developments can be explained in accordance with the perspective of the new conjuncture. I applied to art and normal art solves the puzzles, anomalies, crises, and finally paradigm shift and revolution. This research focuses on the production methods and exhibition time of artwork rather than their contents. It's about methods and exhibition types. For example, in normal periods, collage, decollage, or land arts, graffiti, mixed media, or printmakings are methods in normal art periods. But anomalies in contemporary art, I found that virtual reality installation, artwork made with artificial intelligence, or transdisciplinary artworks, or interactive artworks. It's normal periods use mixed media and the other ones. But after a while, it's quite difficult to examine the movements seen as anomalies from the perspective of the old normal paradigm. Anomalies and paradigm shift in contemporary art. It's about a new perception or confusion or crisis. I examine new paradigm with with three paths. First one is the new paradigm, the changing process of artwork production from individualism to co-production or partnership. Digital production effects are, for example, many disciplines in the field of science, technique, and art have started to work in a collective dimension. The other one, as a consequence, the boundaries between disciplines have intertwined in transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary artwork. I'm going to give an example, Stranger Visions. It's 3D print and DNA collaborating artwork. In Stranger Visions, it is Heather Dewey Hagberg's artwork. She collected hairs, chewed up gum, and cigarette butts from the streets, public bathrooms, and waiting rooms of New York City, and she extracted DNA from them and analyzed it to computationally generate 3D printed life-size full color portraits presenting what those individuals might look like. And it's full of artworks picture. She, according to this artwork, she worked with biology, 3D printed technology, genetic phenotyping, and art fields. It's not only science or art, it's maybe science and art collectivity or unity. It's one path. The other one is the new paradigm, the changing process of showing and exhibiting of artwork. It's about development of interaction between artwork and audience interaction. For example, live audiovisual performances and multi-directional interactive public artworks, or augmented reality artworks, AR artworks, or interactive artworks. I will give two examples from Refik Anadol's artworks. First one is Bosphorus. It was created with real mobility data of Bosphorus water are digitally cubed and depicted on the LED media screen. And the viewer feels in the Bosphorus cool waters because sounds, lights, and images are feel in the Bosphorus waters. The other one is Melting Memories, and it was created by describing the data obtained by measuring the mind waves of individuals within the scope of their memories by neuroscientists. This is one part. According to this part, the audience has the opportunity experience in a holistic structure via sound, light, and images. It's the holistic and the experience, the packets in interactive, active artwork. And the other one is social media application and viewers' personal smartphone. For example, it is Snapchat unites with Jeff Nunes for a globe-spanning AR sculpture project. I think it's the different from classical art perception or conjunction, because between the classical artwork and audience, gap is closed by various application or interactive tools. For example, it's AR technology, and it's providing closing the artwork and audience gap. New paradigm and COVID impacts. Social media application and audience's personal smartphone. I gave an example. Gabran's official Instagram page, it's an application. It's augmented reality artwork. You can use on your Instagram personal camera. Thanks to the work of AR and post-internet artists on social media, art production continued with social distancing in the pandemic. For example, these examples you can use everywhere. It's one of the impact for COVID. The other one is the participation of the audience in the production process as an audience. One of the effects of the digital paradigm on the art production dimension during the pandemic periods. For example, Sam Larson has acquired large audiences for his drawing process videos. And other live streams, question answer stories, to sharing artwork, creating process on Instagram. It provides closed artwork and audience and artists trio gap, the closed, because it's the interactions. For example, Larson's artwork, due to the visibility of the numbers of views and comments from the users in apps such as Instagram, has caused the user to have an impact on the artwork or artist. It can be also shaped because the audiences can do a comment or the views, and they are shapes on the artwork. It's interactive process, especially in COVID impacts, in pandemic periods. The other one is artworks are shared on Instagram via artists in the pandemic periods. For example, Banksy project. According to my hypothesis, closing the gap between the artist, artwork, and audience trio, I think it's the gap. It's the classical meaning gap, especially with the social media in pandemic periods. It's closed because it's the live videos and interaction with the audiences, and closer than the classical meaning perspective. The other one is virtual museum and gallery tours increasing, especially pandemic periods. You can log in the Google Arts and Google, and you can tour in virtual museums and galleries because this situation has been a remarkable effect on the digital paradigm. It's the paradigm shift, and it has been a remarkable effect in pandemic periods. It's my conclusion, evolution of the aura. I'm gonna mention about Walter Benjamin's aura. What is aura? Aura is the perception of authenticity experienced when the audience encounters the unique artwork. According to Benjamin, the aura is an effect of an artwork being uniquely present in the time and space. It's connected to the idea of authenticity. He mentioned about authenticity. A reproduced artwork is never fully present. For example, photographic artists, because it's reproduction arts, and these artworks has lost authentic meaning. But according to my hypothesis, providing authenticity through digitalization, the aura has also evolved in the sense as the relationship that the audience establishes with the artwork in digital arts has turned from the classical meaning to the passive one. Because artworks, digital artworks can be reproduced and exhibited in many different areas. For example, public areas, or for example, in social media, Instagram and Snapchat, as they are an installation actually. And therefore, a digital artwork is become a momentary experience because it's it has got a lot of sounds, lights, and interactive tools. Thus, audiences will be providing active and establish an authentic bond, and loss of authentic can gain in digital arts and can gain the aura authenticity. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all the participants and for all the presentations, Müge Ertem, Efe Korkutkurt, Beren Madra, and Gabriele Romeo. Now we have the discussion session. You can, let me remind you that you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Meanwhile, we can, the floor is open. You can use also the chat part of the, at the right part of the screen. Oof. And meanwhile, I've been thinking about the presentations. Maybe I could initiate some talks while you guys are thinking. Well, Beran Mandra, you mentioned the critical role that art criticism is playing during the pandemic, in COVID, and in post-COVID. I find this worth to more discussion because you've mentioned to give a critical view to society about all aspects of everyday life with art. And you also mentioned the importance of freedom of expression and surveillance during the pandemic, and the positioning of art criticism rather than, and the importance of the independent funding rather than public and private funding, because they have their own, they may have their own priorities, which may affect the freedom of expression and the criticism and the role of and the power of criticism in these days. Would you like to elaborate more on that, and maybe talk more on the importance of the independent funding in these times, independent initiatives?
Yes, thank you, Ebru, for these important questions. We are always thinking about these issues, since not only during the pandemic period, but all the time. And not only in countries like Turkey, where the infrastructures are not well developed for the benefit of artists, art critics, and academicians, etc. In many countries, in the systems of many countries, these issues are important. But there are, I mean, of course, there are countries which have found many solutions, first of all, to support the young generation artists who have to make themselves visible during their first moments of production. There are funds, but what kind of funds? This is important. In this sense, the state, the local governments, and the private sector should come together and make total funds which have no name. That's important. If the funds have no name, anonymous, then the artist is free, more independent. Otherwise, the artist depends on the policies, on the statements or ideologies of the source of the fund. So this is what makes the artist's career a little bit difficult, I think. And they are, the art critics are also mentioning these issues when they look to the, for example, we hear always that the museums are being criticized from where the money comes. I mean, from time to time, profiles come in front of the museum, which is actually official museum, and these profiles are not well accepted in the capitalist economic system, by the artists and art critics and culture audiences. So there are solutions, of course, but unfortunately, these solutions should be produced by the artists themselves, artists or art critics or experts themselves, collaborating, making collective movements, making collective demands, and taking part in the democratic process of their countries. Otherwise, they are invisible. Mm-hmm. And now, during these, during Efe's and Müge's presentation, I thought, wow, now copyright, authenticity, and unique work, these three characteristics of the classic artwork or contemporary artwork is now different. So how can you prove through online presentation your copyright? I mean, even if you put the copyright sign symbol on your work, it can be copied and distributed to millions of people without your knowledge. Or what is authenticity of an artwork? Because since this morning we are seeing street art on the walls of London streets, and I thought, this looks like the work of that artist, for example. There was also associations with artworks of famous artists, etc. And then, what is unique work now? Because everything is interdisciplinary. I mean, you have to introduce interdisciplinary work to this very heterogeneous audience population in front of you in many countries. So on the other hand, big masses of people are looking to landscape paintings. They like landscape paintings made by artists continuously. I mean, hundreds, millions of landscape paintings are produced and they are introduced, presented in the art exhibitions all over the world. For example, we know that in China, there are mega studios where artists produce artworks according to the desires, as Efe described what desire is, because it's a complex thing, desires of people. I mean, they interview the customer and make a painting. So, I mean, it's a very complex situation. But, of course, there is a scale where everything is decided. Where is this scale? This scale is in the big, how can I say, institutions of rich countries, I think. They decide what kind of artwork should be produced and what kind of artwork should not be produced. And it depends on the values of art market, global art market. So I'm not so optimistic, sorry.
I can see that.
One minute. But art critics play a role in this complex situation, Ebru. Mm-hmm. An important role, because mm-hmm. from time to time, the people can see the truth through art critics' ideas and their essays, etc. So, I mean, if people want to have more information, more knowledge on what is going on in art, they go to independent art critics' texts. That's for sure.
Well, the next, before I will go to the next questions for Müge Ertem, I've just recently seen a question in the Q&A box from Eva, an independent curator from Stockholm, Sweden, to Beral Madra. So she says, very important statement from Beral Madra about funding and possible hidden agendas, especially today when, at least here in Sweden, we're experiencing a drastic paradigm shift from public funded culture to a new public management thinking, ultra-liberal ideas to affect the content of culture and reorganizing all institutions. So her question is, do you see any signs that artists are really critic to even the institutions funding them? How far can they go in these times when they are in a really hard economical situation?
Yes.
For Beral Madra, Müge, I'm really sorry. This is for first, this request of Eva.
Müge should answer, then I will do.
No, I confused. I'm a bit confused.
Should I speak?
So Beral,
yes. Okay.
Yeah, yes. The problem is there is a difference between, still there is a difference between countries, between democracies, between rich countries, between countries with high economic level and low economic level. I mean, we cannot say that everywhere it is the same. It is different in for example, North European countries like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, because the artists, art critics are very well supported through official funds there. And private sector is more precise in their contribution to the artwork. But we can look, I also underlined the situation in Turkey and in the region, but this region is not so small. I mean, go to Greece, which is European Union country, go to Bulgaria, European Union country, go to Romania, European Union country. What is happening there in contemporary art and culture? And when we go to the more east, it is impossible to talk about contemporary art productions because everywhere, from Armenia, Azerbaijan, Iran, I mean, Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, there is a contemporary art production there because there are artists continuously producing. But what is happening with this production? Only when these artists are invited to European Union cities to show their artworks, they become visible. They become somehow important. So, I mean, there is a deficit in contemporary art and culture industries in many countries around Turkey, including Turkey. Even if we can speak that Istanbul is the hotspot of this region and it is producing, it is showing, it has private museums, there is a production, but still we need a more convincing system in order to have a real, a truthful situation. We should not make like Efe said, fantasies about what is happening in Turkey. We have to work. We have to see the truth, and we have to all the time find solutions to our movements, strategies, solutions. But I think For the moment, all artwork should interfere into the political scene. Otherwise, there is no way out. All NGOs, artistic NGOs, should enter into the political scene and force the politicians to change this system towards a more sustainable, more profitable culture industry.
Thank you, Beral. Here is a question from Julian to Müge. Do you have an analysis on the level of engagement with works on social media, for instance, Instagram?
With the personal phone and the filters used, the distance between artwork and person is removed. It seems to be a mediating tool and disappearing the gap, I think. It's about the filters and interactive artworks. And in addition, I want to say the digital artworks are anomaly, but anomaly it doesn't have to any problem. It can be development in art in the contemporary art because it's the new gaze. Firstly, it looks like a new gaze, and it didn't understand the old classical art paradigm, but it's the new development, and it can be understood in the new developments.
Okay, there is another question from Ahmet Ergenç to Gabriele Romeo and Beren Madra and to Müge Ertem. Ahmet Ergenç says, I think this crisis can function as a propelling force for the creativity of generation who were too devoid of a tragic sense and political involvement. What do you think? Can all this so-called paradigm shift can lead to a breaking point in creativity, an engaged and political kind of creativity? The question goes to, as I've mentioned, to all of you.
Yes, for example, in Italy, we have this problem for the politician system about the creativity, the image inside the creativity. For example, we have different artists to remake the Catalan style, because Catalan to change the method about the communication inside the system of the art, because it's a scatologic system. But when we, the young artists, observe the masters artist, for example, in Turin, we have the urban museum in the city of the Turin. The director is Eduardo Di Mauro. This is the places, open places for the different street artists. But the artists, they remake the masters. For example, Kostas Svarostos. Kostas Svarostos is a Greek artist, and in this moment, he presents different flags of the country, broken flags in the glasses, to present in that gallery in Turin. It's more important for us to look, to watch the culture of the Oriental culture, because European, we are our community, not only Italy or single France, German, or the Central European. This is for the tradition of the Italy, because normally we have Constantinople, Byzantium, we have high connection together. But the image is more important because we have two different production. Before Moog to present, for example, the Kunz digital process about the dog, no? But we have, for example, the model of the caves, no? Caves. Caves is similar for the digital process now, but it's the styling, new styling, because we have a new necessity for to building new words inside the arts.
Thank you, Gabriele. Any other participants would like to respond?
I think I answered the political responsibility of the artist. For the moment, there is this kind of responsibility, not only in Turkey. I mean, in all the countries, the artists have, at this moment, when the politics is in creating a traumatic lifestyle all over the world. I mean, look to South America, North America, Asia, all over the autocratic governments are creating a very traumatic way of life for the people. And within these contexts, the artists are the only profiles who can produce a resistant visual work, because visual language is still a resistant point against this kind of developments. During the pandemic, I think this visuality became more important because everything is through visual tools. Everything is happening through visual tools at the moment. And I mean, there are some periods where artists have to use their knowledge, their force of creativity for democratic developments. It happened in 20th century and it is happening now too. And digital art is also another tool. What is digital art showing to very ignorant groups of people? It shows that technology and science is important. And imagine what happens in the religiously conservative societies if you show these works. They face the truth that science and technology is important. So it is kind of controversial situation. Technology and science is making fantastic pictures.
I force myself not to get too involved in the discussion because I'm the moderator and I will focus on my task today. So here's another comment, a question from Zeynep Kendi to Müge Ertem. Zeynep Kendi says, evolution of aura may be meaningful when the artwork, whether digital, 2D or 3D, and the audience are there physically engaging.
Because it's installation, it can be reproduced, but it isn't any problem. I want to say, yes, it's the unique artwork, but it can be reproduced and it cannot lose their aura. The authenticity of the aura remains alive in the interaction of the audience with sound and visuality, I think.
Thank you. Melike and Raul Kübler make a remark. They said, we will present some empirical social media engagement analysis tomorrow. And well, Gonca Katzman made a comment, actually privately, but I'm not sure if I should read it out loud because she wrote it on privately, so I'm not going to read it. But what should I do in this context?
It's private.
Okay, so then she revised and opened the comments to all panelists. I would like to add to Beral Madra that many theater stages are on the verge of closing and aid campaigns are organized for these scenes on social media. But this cannot be a definitive solution without state support. Theater is the first discipline of art to be blocked in extraordinary situations. The pandemic period has turned into a biopolitics that will prevent artists from producing street arts, and interdisciplinary digital art is therefore very important. Critics should be brave about this because this pandemic period develops a control mechanism over art. This is very dangerous, especially for Turkey. She also says thank you.
Let me remember about our movement with Fırat Arapoğlu and Gazi Selçuk. We, when the new municipalities started their work in Istanbul, we visited the municipality and we presented them all the issues, problematic issues we are experiencing in our careers, including cinema, theater, music. We didn't make any discrimination between the disciplines. We just said, if the new municipality has a new cultural and artistic policy, please communicate with us and we will help you. A workshop. I think, when was it? Just before the pandemic. And in this workshop, there were 500 people in the Ebru, you remember probably.
Yes, yes.
And so we really discussed all the issues we are discussing now in detail. And at the end, they published a small booklet about the results of this workshop. But what about the application of these issues? So we are still waiting for them to start to make. And so then I can answer Gonca's question. We have to force them to use this list of do that, don't do that list of presentation. And therefore I'm saying, after during the pandemic and after the pandemic, the art and culture world has to act collaboratively. There is no other way. For example, we have to make an interdisciplinary big congress after Corona days. And then we have to force the local governments and the state and the political parties.
This is not new, actually, right? I cannot stop making any comments. But this is not new, actually, right? It's been almost like 20 years with all these digital opportunities and challenges, with all these works. We have been trying to force these art institutions and everyone in the arts world that we can try. I don't say we must, but we can try and explore the new opportunities and maybe change our materials and techniques and methods and ways of thinking and acting and organizing. So I'm not one of those who would like to fetishize the importance of the digital tools, of course, but I just would like to emphasize that it is not new, at least to me. It shouldn't be new. All right. Any other comments or questions or any other out loud thinking like mine? All right. Well, thank you, all the presentators, and for your wonderful presentations and for your time. And we will, thank you. We will continue tomorrow in our conference. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a nice
you.
day. Goodbye.
Bye.